Now, you're a campaigner for open and free information for all South Africans. Are these documents the type of things that the Right2Know campaign wants available to all South Africans? In an ideal world, would the state security agencies' comings and goings be made public?
Look, I think that the first thing that we have to recognize is that, as far as I know, state security hasn't responded yet. But when they do, I think that we're likely to see a response that is fairly typical in a situation like this, saying, this is terrible for national security, all of our secrets have been exposed, it's putting people at risk, it's putting you at risk, this is why we need to have this tight control of information. But there are a few responses to that. The first thing is we should note that this isn't total exposure of information. Two news agencies, The Guardian and Al Jazeera, and perhaps some other news agencies will be added to that, are very carefully going through these documents. They're checking their sources. They're withholding a lot of documents if they feel that it's sensitive. They're releasing it very slowly. It's a drip feed. So this is not some total information anarchy. If anything, this is quite a conservative, filtered approach. And certainly what we're seeing is that the information they're releasing is really deeply in the public interest. It reveals these very important power networks and these relationships that are happening behind our backs without us being consulted. So I think that it's definitely important that we're peeling back this layer of secrecy, and we're finally beginning to judge for ourselves whether or not we're happy with the conduct of our government, whether or not all of these decisions are taken in our interest or not. You know, one of the points I want to make, and you know, this is something that the Right2Know campaign has been warning about for a number of years, is that there is this excessive secrecy around South Africa's security state. I mean, excessive secrecy, almost blanket secrecy. They don't release annual reports. They don't table a budget in Parliament. They don't release even basic policy documents about what they think are their priorities and how they think they will sort of pursue those priorities. Parliament's Intelligence Oversight Committee meets entirely behind closed doors. Again, it only it releases annual reports sporadically. So we're being kept totally in the dark, and there's much of that information is being kept secret when that's unjustifiable. So when you have this situation where you have total secrecy, total excessive secrecy, it really creates an environment where the sort of journalism that we're seeing now around these spy cables is necessary. The transparency is a much needed antidote to that kind of secrecy. One of the most significant things is that this is exactly, this is exactly what the government was warning about when they said, this is why we need a secrecy bill. We need to be able to protect ourselves against these terrible leaks. But in fact, it's ironically proved the opposite point. The kind of journalism that we're seeing around the spy cables is very important for the public. It's really information that we have the right to know. However, because of the broadness and the vagueness of the secrecy bill, it's exactly this kind of journalism that would be prosecuted under the secrecy bill. Remember that, in fact, this kind of journalism would be classified as espionage under the secrecy bill, because in terms of the secrecy bill, espionage is any release of classified information where the author, or where the person involved knew or ought reasonably to have known that it would directly or indirectly benefit a foreign state. Now, this is journalism which is benefiting us, but it may directly or indirectly benefit a foreign state. That doesn't matter. However, this kind of journalism is being classified as espionage and carries these penalties of up to 25 years in jail. So for us, I think that this really is an important act of journalism that is advancing the South Africans' public interest and the public interest of global citizens elsewhere. But it's the sort of thing that states will seek to clamp down on, and they really are using that secrecy, in some cases, to protect their own interests.
And despite that, like you said earlier, this has actually been incredibly responsible reporting. We've seen this give and take of information that's been slow, it's been steady, and it's been checked over and over.
And in fact, it's worth noting that states and more conservative political analysts talk about these kinds of leaks, this leak-driven journalism as irresponsible. But even when we look at the actions that WikiLeaks took, or that Edward Snowden took, there was never a total release of information. In fact, it was, in many cases, a more conservative approach of trying to vet this information, trying to determine which information actually needed to be withheld or redacted. As you said, this is a drip feed where the information has been analyzed quite closely. And as a result, we're likely to see some quite important revelations. And we expect to hear back that this is deeply irresponsible, it's putting us all at risk. This has shown what we've been arguing all along, but that simply doesn't stand up. That argument doesn't stand up.